Ask away, anything you like.
Good morning, viewers in UK, and good afternoon in Pakistan here, and whatever the times you have in your countries. We have a brilliant writer, a novelist, Mr. Michael Stewart from England today with us, and more we are going to know about the Michael in detail from himself. So, Michael, welcome to our program today.
Thanks, Atiq. Thanks for having me.
Let's start with your birth. Where were you born, and how did you start your educational background, and then reaching to be a writer?
Well, I was born in Salford, and I grew up in a very working class environment. I left school at 16. I didn't go to college. I worked in factories for many years, and was very frustrated with that. I worked in lots of dead end jobs, basically, in Salford and Manchester, till probably my mid 20s, and then I realised, I've been writing for a long time in the background, and I realised it's what I wanted to do. At about 25 or something, I went to university and I did an English degree, and I started taking my writing seriously, basically, and changed my life, I guess. Um, but yeah, as a school child, there was no kind of idea really that you could be anything like a writer. I didn't know anyone who'd ever been a writer. It wasn't a world I was familiar with. And in fact, at school, I was in a bottom group for English, so it didn't look very promising, really.
Right. So, how did it all happen? As you said that you were not that much good in English language either, and then turning to be a writer and a wonderful novelist, and then you wrote, very popular novels. I was going through your profile where it says that you have won different awards, you have been nominated for different awards, and right now you are heading at the Huddersfield University, and that is creative writing. That is something really amazing, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's been an interesting journey, really. It's been a surprising journey. If you'd asked me, age 16, 17, where I'd be at this stage in my life, I'd have absolutely no idea at all, So it's been a surprise, really. Um, I guess I've just always had a passion for stories, really. And the reason why I didn't do well at school was not because I couldn't write. It was just because I didn't like formal education, and I didn't really understand why there were so many rules and regulations, and I didn't conform to them, and I didn't see the purpose of them. And I realized as a writer, actually, a lot of what you do as a writer is you break rules. You're an outlaw, really. So that I found that very appealing, really.
Michael, I guess there was some problem with the internet at your side, so we
Oh,
couldn't
is there?
hear
Hang
your
on.
last sentence.
Where
Now it's
where did
better.
you?
We got you.
Yeah, where did it get interrupted?
Just when you started, so it didn't work actually.
Oh,
This
right.
sentence, you have to just
Well, I was just saying
go
really
back
that,
again.
at school I didn't do well at school, not because I couldn't write. I didn't do well at school because I didn't get formal education. I just didn't like rules and regulations, and I didn't conform to them. I didn't want to follow them. And what I realized really, as a writer, you are a lawbreaker. You are breaking the rules all the time. So I found that very appealing, really. Um, so I guess I've always loved storytelling, as an art form.
Great, great. So, Mike, can we say that everybody can be a storyteller?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, isn't it, where because everyone can write a sentence, or most people can write a sentence, they think they can write a book. But it's like, I can kick a football, but I couldn't be, a top athlete, or I think there's a big difference, really. And I get approached all the time by writers who have aspirations, and I can certainly I can improve their writing. I can take a student, over 3 years and make them a better writer, but I can't necessarily make them a publishable writer, or a writer that people want to read, because that's something different altogether. So I can teach them the formal qualities of writing. I can teach them the craft, but actually the thing, I guess, the kind of chaos, the imaginative chaos that you need, and that different way of looking at the world is not something that can be taught, I don't think.
Right, Mike. Mike, see, when we see the different kind of writers in, let's say that in English literature, we see that some of the writers, they call it, the writing some kind of revelation, that something comes from somewhere and then they just write it down. As you just said that everyone might have, that craft to write, might have that material to write, but some writings are different. They come from your inner feelings. So how were you when you started writing? Because you had no formal education, you had nothing. It was something your inside what wanted you to write something, was it?
Yeah, I guess I was an angry young man, really. I was angry, I was frustrated, I was unhappy, I was in a place I didn't want to be, I was doing a job I hated, I was surrounded by people that I didn't like or respect. And I was writing out of frustration, really. I was just writing because I had this thing in my head and I had to get it out. That's how it began. But of course, once you become a professional writer, you can't hang around waiting for inspiration. You have to get down every day to the office or to the studio and sit down and write. You have to. It's a job. So yeah, I think another thing you can't teach is actually the stamina and the determination to sit on a chair every day for 5 or 6 hours and write a book. Uh, that again, that's something that you have to have or you haven't got.
Right, right, Mike. So, how did it start? Like, did it start from a small story, a short story, and then it was published somewhere? People came to know. How did this journey start?
Well, I guess at the time in Manchester where I lived, there was quite a healthy performance poetry scene, and a lot of writers that I was friendly with came up through that platform, really. So people like Lem Say, Henry Normal, who now runs a TV company. Sorry, I'll just turn that off. That's my uh, it's my emails coming through. I do apologize. Um, so yeah, I basically got on stage at a pub in Manchester and performed some poetry, and that's how it began. And I got chatting to people afterwards. I won a couple of slam competitions and things like that. And yeah, so I guess just writing stuff really and getting up on stage was how it all happened for me. Then I started writing scripts. I wrote scripts for theatre for quite a long time before I turned to writing books. Have
Great,
you lost me
great.
again?
So, can we say that it was more, you can say, your fortune, your luck, which took you towards because you were an angry young man, you did not go for the formal education, and that was just like, something started. And then right now you're more popular, or you're more known, or you are more read as a novelist rather than a poet. But the journey started as a poet, that you started writing some poetry and it was being recognized, and then you reached to the theater.
Yeah, I think the poetry that I was writing actually, it was very narrative based. I was writing characters and I was writing stories even within the poems. So I guess in that sense, it wasn't such a massive transition from writing poems to writing scripts to writing books. Because what I've always been interested in is characters, character-driven stories, and the kind of tensions really between characters when you put different characters together and what comes out of that, and the sort of conflicts that arise from that. So really, whether it's poetry or short fiction or novels or scripts, it's all the same in that sense. My interest in characters is where it begins and ends.
That's great. And how about your first novel? Would you like to tell us about? the idea of first novel? What was it about, and how did you write it?
Yeah, well, I've got it here actually. This is the first book I wrote. This is King Crow. This is a novel which was published nearly 10 years ago now, January. January 9 years ago. It's a book about a character called Cooper, who's a 16-year-old boy. He's been excluded from school, and he's obsessed by ravens. Where he lives in Salford, there are no ravens. They've been extinct many, many years. And he knows, or he finds out that there's a place in Cumbria where there are ravens nesting. And he goes with a school friend to find these ravens. And when they do, they meet this character who's very dodgy. He's been in prison, and things go wrong, and he becomes embroiled in this world. And so, but really, it's a story about an outsider figure. It's a story about a boy who just doesn't fit into the world, and seeks solace in birds and sees people as birds. He's a bit kind of, I guess, in today's parlance, you would call him Asperger's. He doesn't relate to people. He sees the world through the filter of this bird obsession.
Right. So, wasn't it something that you were inspired or you were going through, so you wrote this novel? That many things you face yourself, and it was a self kind of inspiration?
Yeah, I think very often the first things that you write are based on your own lives, your own stories. And I do have things in common with Cooper. I was from Salford. I am from Salford. I did get excluded from school. I was obsessed by birds of the feathered variety. And but I would say I exaggerated and extended lots of those traits when I created the character of Cooper. He's a far more extreme version of me, if you like.
Ah, that's what the literature is, that it starts from, we say that one, two, three, and then it goes to hundreds. It's the power of imagination, and you definitely use your power of imagination to make it happen. Mike, how many novels have you written till now?
Well, I've written 6 books, but only 3 novels. I'm working on a fourth one now. So King Crow was my first. I wrote a book after that called Cathy Assassin. That one there. My latest novel is called Ill Will, which is that one. If you can see that. And the book I'm writing at the moment is a book called The Last Wolf. So I've just finished the first draft of that, and I'm going through some edits on the book. So yeah, four novels in total.
4,000. And what about the other 2 books you're talking about?
So Cathy Assassin was my second novel, and it's quite different to the first. It's about a 40-year-old bloke who has spent 22 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. And when he comes out of prison, he tracks down his best friend. They were involved in a crime when they were 18, and he went down for the crime, and his friend, who was actually the culprit, got off and became a very powerful barrister. So he tracks him down in the law courts, and he wants justice really, but he actually wants Andrew's life. He wants everything he's got. He wants his house and his car, his nice holiday home, and his wife, and pretty much everything else. So he sets about to basically do this life swap and get everything that Andrew's got and put Andrew in the position that he's in. So it's quite a twisted revenge story, really. And then the book after that, which is Ill Will, again is very different. Again, I don't know if you know the novel Wuthering Heights. I now live in Yorkshire, opposite the birthplace of Emily Bronte, who's a very famous novelist here. She wrote a book called Wuthering Heights, uh, 200 years ago almost. And the main character in that, Heathcliff, in the book goes missing for 3 years, and when he returns, he's completely changed. He's a sadist. And I was always fascinated by that journey and that hole in the narrative. And I wrote Ill Will to kind of answer that question, really. So my character, Heathcliff, my book starts where Heathcliff disappears from her book, and it ends where he rejoins her in the original novel. So yeah, it's basically it's filling in the gap of those 3 years.
Great, great. Mike, did any filmmaker contacted you for making a film on your novel base?
Well, it's been, yeah. So Ill Will has been optioned by a film company called Kudos. So Kudos they do lots of TV stuff actually. They do a lot of serial form dramas. They do one-off films as well. So yeah, it is under option at the moment with Kudos Films. But as you know, that's not a guarantee it'll be made. An option very often doesn't result in a production. But fingers crossed, we'll see what happens.
Right, Mike. So, what age bracket like your novels most? Is it more attracted towards the teenagers, or the youth, or the elderly ones? What age
Well,
bracket do you think that are
I
most
well, I think that's determined actually by who reads books largely. You yes, young people do read books, but I think less so. I think young people have many other distractions in their lives. I think if you were to look at the the typical reader, if you like, is a middle-aged woman. I do lots of book events. I do reading groups and festivals, and the audience is largely an older audience and mainly female. I don't know what it is about books and why women read more books than men. Men do read books, but they tend to read non-fiction, don't they? They tend to read factual books. When they do read fiction, and I'm generalizing here. Obviously, lots of men do read my books, but lots of my readers are women of an over 40 sort of age, which is fine. It's good.
That's great. That's really wonderful to know. Mike, how do you see the change in, novel writing? If we go, 30 years back, the novel writing was somehow, having different trends, and right now the modern novel. How do you see the difference between this modern novel writing and the past one?
Yeah, I mean, it's if you look at the Victorian novel, it's changed massively, hasn't it? But the Victorian moral novel had a moral, it was a moralistic kind of art form, really. One of the reasons why Emily Bronte got in so much trouble with Wuthering Heights is that it didn't have a moral. There was no obvious kind of moral message behind it. Um, I don't think that's the responsibility of novelists now. We're almost the opposite, really. We're kind of provocateurs to an extent. We're not trying to give a kind of they all lived happily ever after, follow this way of life kind of message. We're often kind of leaving things open. The tendency now in narratives is to have an open ending, to not fully resolve the story and to kind of leave elements of the story kind of brewing under the surface and to kind of create a sort of unease, really. Because I think one of the things that happens with a neatly concluded book is you kind of stop thinking about it, really, because the world's over, the story's finished. I think with lots of modern novels, the objective is to keep the book alive in the mind of the reader, and which is why there's such a propensity for the kind of open ending, really, in modern novels.
Right, Mike. How about the change in the language? Because if we go, as you said, the Victorian novels and the time of Shakespeare and before, we see the novel writing has very difficult kind of language, difficult in the way we say that it is very pure kind of language. But the evolution in language has brought the evolution in the novel writing as well. The language
Yeah,
is
but
quite easy.
yeah, I think generally, if you look at the way that language has evolved, it's become less formal. So if you look at modern, early modern English, the language that Shakespeare used, and you trace that through the Victorian novel to contemporary writers, what you have basically is a deformalization of the language. And we're now at a stage where we do have some form of formal language. In the law courts, it's still very formal, and in certain businesses and things like that. In medicine, it's very formal. But in entertainment and in art, the language has become much more informal, and there's much more likelihood of things like swear words being used. I mean, so in the Victorian times, you weren't allowed to publish a swear word in a book. We don't have those restrictions now, so that's freed up our use of the language. Some may say, not necessarily for the best. Some people say that those restrictions were good. So it's not necessarily a good thing. but certainly that's how it's developed.
Great, great. Like, different writers, different such kind of people who are, authoring the books or they write the poetry. They're always, inspired by some people, some other writers. Uh, as we knew about your life story, so it means that, this was something, your self motivation that you started writing. But any writer inspired you or you love to read?
Yeah, I mean, my first literary love really was a writer called Edgar Allan Poe, American short story writer and poet. And I was probably about 10 or something when I discovered him. I was very ill with glandular fever. I was in bed for about 10 weeks when I was young, and my mother got me some books from the library. And in one of these books was a poem by Edgar Allan Poe, and it just hit me like a bolt of lightning. It absolutely knocked me sideways. And when I came out of convalescence, I was in bed for 10 weeks. The first thing I did was to go to a bookshop and get Edgar Allan Poe's complete works, and I just read everything he'd written, every essay, every short story, every poem, and he started me off. Really, I thought I want to be like him. I want to be a writer. Um, I've since had other literary obsessions. William Blake, the visionary poet and artist, it was a huge obsession, still is. Samuel Beckett, an Irish playwright and novelist, has long been an obsession of mine. I mentioned Emily Bronte. The Bronte sisters are a huge influence on me. I've chose to live in Bronte land. I live very close to where they were all born. I'm steeped in their literary history, and they remain a kind of influence really, and a guiding kind of light as well, I guess.
Great. So these were the inspirations, definitely you are keep getting some inspiration, yeah, and you are keep reading them as well. Uh, Mike, how do you see about the reading habits? Because we see that in last 30 years, even 25 to 30-year reading habits are, just diminishing. People are, less readers. Before, do you remember that? I remember 20, 25 years back that we used to see the people sitting in the buses after the job and reading the books, or going in the morning and picking up the book. But now you see mostly people busy in the mobiles or the iPhones, these iPads and things. So how do you see it effects on the reading habits?
Yeah, I mean, the smartphone and the invention of the smartphone and the prevalence of the smartphone has completely changed all our lives, hasn't it? In every aspect of it, really. And we're all now slaves to these pocket devices. We're completely plugged into them and addicted to them in a way that no one really foresaw. If you read all the science fiction, they predicted all kinds of things, but they didn't. They had no one second guessed this one. It just snuck up on us, didn't it? And my God, what a thing! We're all now, looking for likes and emotional reassurance from these little devices that we carry around with us. So yeah, it's very hard as a writer to compete with that, really. And it's hard to know what people are doing on their phones. Maybe they are reading books. You can read books on your phones. Maybe that's what they're doing. There's been a huge increase in audiobooks, and I think that's because we have these smartphones in our pockets, and some people find it easier to listen to somebody narrate a book rather than read it themselves. I prefer to read a book. I mean, I do use audiobooks and I like them, but my preference is always the printed word. But for some people, I think maybe it's a childhood thing. It's a kind of regression. They were read to as children in bed, and they like that. It's comforting. In a world that's in flux, in a world that's full of anxiety and turmoil, maybe that kind of comforting voice in your ear saying "Once upon a time," and giving you that story. Maybe that's just a huge comfort. So I think that's certainly the way that a lot of books are going now. They are succeeding as audiobooks. Um, People will always read. I think that will never stop. And what's the internet if not just a load of words? I mean, the internet is the biggest library ever, isn't it? It's just got millions and millions of words. So people are reading more than ever. But what are they reading? Well, they're reading different kinds of things, aren't they? And it's not always well written prose. It's if you look at YouTube, you look at the comments underneath. Some of them can barely form a word, can they, or a sentence? So it's not necessarily writing that's particularly edifying. You know what I mean? So it's a worrying trend, I guess. As a writer, it's my livelihood. So yeah, I've vested interest in people picking up books and reading them.
Quite right, quite right. So, Mike, we see creative writing. We see how do you define the creative writing, and who can be a creative writer to your understanding? Can anybody become a creative writer?
Yeah, I mean, anyone can pick up a pen or a pencil and write something. Certainly, yeah. I mean, how do I define creative writing? Well, I think essentially it's about dramatizing. You know, most writing tells you things. It's informative, or it's factual, or it summarizes information. Where creative writing does the opposite. It actually elongates it. It takes you into a scene. It slows time down. You know, I can say that Jane was scared. Jane was scared, 3 words. I've summarized her emotions. To show that through a scene can take a paragraph, maybe a page. I've got to put Jane somewhere. I've got to describe what she's wearing and what she's like, where she is, the world she's in. Is she in a street? Is she in a woods? Is she at home? I've got to then show through her emotions, both inside and her actions outside, how her fear manifests itself. So it's not a very efficient form of writing. It's the opposite of efficiency. It's actually a very inefficient form of writing. But the difference is it gets you here, it gets you heart. In most writing, we process intellectually. It goes into our brain and we process it. With creative writing, it's an emotional response. It's something that we want to make you laugh. We want to make you cry. We want to move you in some way. And that's a very different remit, I think, to most of the language and most of the writing.
Great, great. Might say a lot of people out there, I've especially come across with different youngsters who want to be the writers, who love to write. But don't you see that, for writing something, first of all, you must have a little, broader vision. You must be a reader first. You must read others. So at least the windows of your mind can open and you can fly high to imagine so you can write.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's so important as a writer to read, and as important as writing, really. I mean, reading and writing are, in a way, the same thing. They're different sides of the same coin. You have to spend every day. You know, I read every morning. I read, for hours. Every day. Um, you have to immerse yourself in any chosen. If you want to be an expert footballer, you have to play football and watch football and immerse yourself in the world of football and talk to footballers and your life becomes football, doesn't it? It's the same thing with writing. You have to immerse yourself in that world, and that involves reading what's out there and placing yourself within that milieu, really, and saying what sort of writer are you, and who are you responding to, and where are you within that world and that culture, and have you got anything to say? Are you just repeating what everyone's already said, or have you got something novel, original, and interesting to put out there? There's no point in just writing something that's already been written. And if you haven't read widely, you don't know that, and there's a good chance you'll end up repeating what's already out there because there is millions and millions of books out there already.
Great, great. I would like to listen from you, especially for those youngsters who want to be the writers. What skills do they really need to become the writers?
Well, absolutely, the most important thing is determination, really. That is the most important thing because all you're going to get is for years and years and years before you break through is knockbacks and closed doors and people saying no to you and people ignoring you, letters not getting answered, emails never getting replies, constant rejection, really, for many, many years, unless you're lucky. I know writers that they've written one thing and it's gone, and they've got a big publishing deal, a fantastic big advance, and they've just made it, and that's wonderful. But in reality, for most people, that's not how it works out, and you have to be determined, and you have to have that kind of inner, I guess, in a fire, really. You have to be burning inside and not take no for an answer, and have that self belief, really. And although I don't have self belief in other aspects of my life, I've always had self belief in my own writing. I don't know why. I've just always had that belief in it, really. And without that, I would have given up a long time ago, I think.
Great, great. Mike, as I earlier asked as well, but I just changed a little question that some people have a belief that, writing is something, the divinely instructed kind of thing. It is something you are being instructed and you just start writing. There are two types of writers. One, you said that, they are going through something. That's why they have experienced some bitter kind of realities, or, they have gone through different pains and all. And you said that some people are, born with a gift of writing.
Sorry, I missed what you said. Then it glitched, and I missed the question. Could you ask it again, please?
I guess we have lost my. I think internet connection is little weak from that side and this side also. But
I can
let's
I can hear
wait
you
for a
clearly
few
now.
seconds. We'll
I
get
can
the
hear you
mic back
fine now.
again, and then we can continue our question. Meanwhile, viewers, you are here listening today from Michael Stewart, who is the author of Novelist, and hello.
Oh,
So
hi, back again.
yeah,
Don't know
internet
what
thing
happened there.
happened. So my question was just that some people are experiencing, and some people they are following as their, you can say, as their future in this writing, in creative writing. But some writers, are they still there who are those like we see from the Shakespearean time as well, that some of the writers they call it divinely instructed, and they say that we were just at that time and we just wrote this novel, or we wrote this poem. So does it happen as well?
I think it might, your perception of it might feel like that. I mean, the brain is a very mysterious organ, isn't it? And you don't always know where your ideas come from. And so it's, I guess it's, for some people, it's logical to assume that's come from elsewhere. But I don't have those beliefs personally. I don't ascribe to those beliefs, and I don't have any, you know, sense of that at all, really. But yeah, I mean, that's, I mean, many books have been written with that in mind, haven't they? But that's certainly not the way that I see it now.
Great, great. Mike would like to know about your upcoming novel, which is about to be published. And today we had a plan that we just have more information. What is the theme behind, and what is it all about?
So the new book's called The Last Wolf, and it's about the last wolf in England, and it's set during the Civil War, which is in the 17th century. So it starts in 1649. King Charles has just been killed. Cromwell's just come back from Ireland. There's been a massacre of Catholics over there. So it's a very interesting time politically. England is completely divided between royalists and parliamentarians, between Roundheads and the Cavaliers. And brother are fighting against brother, father against son. It's a very divided world. And in this world, there is the last wolf, and some men are hunting this wolf, trying to kill the wolf. There's a price on the wolf's head, and there are some women who have been accused of witchcraft, and they're hiding out. They're basically, they've escaped from persecution, and they worship this wolf. So it's about these two different communities, really, and the tensions between them, and the war that occurs between them.
Right. Mike, is this wolf symbolizing something?
Yeah, I mean, the wolf is what's wild in us, and our need to connect with what's wild in us. I think we're outside of the conversation. All of nature is very carefully calibrated, isn't it? Everything's connected in some way, and we have taken ourselves outside of that conversation, and we no longer converse with nature. And I believe for our very survival, we have to re-engage and rejoin the conversation with nature. And the wolf is a symbol. The wolf is a symbol of what we're trying to kill. The wolf is a symbol of what we've lost. The wolf is a symbol of what we need to do to reconnect to the real world, the world that's out there, not this virtual world that we've all immersed ourselves in. So yeah, it's highly symbolic. The wolf is highly symbolic.
Great, great. Mike, in your experience, as we just listened that you had no formal education, you did not like to, follow the rules and regulations. You were the man of your own mind, your own ideas. Yes, definitely, this is something, kind of Victorian thing, but you converted it into very positive that, towards writing, towards poetry, as you said, and then further on you're continuing with it. How do you see the role of formal education in one's life?
Well, I've been very critical of formal education, really, and maybe unfairly, I don't know. But I think here in England, it may be different in Pakistan. I don't know about your education system, but in England, it's become very much a political arena, and successive governments, use education for their own means, really, their own gains. We have a national curriculum here, which is very reductive. I mean, kids now don't read books; they just read extracts of books. So if you're studying English at school now, you don't actually read a book; you just read these chosen passages. When you study poetry at school now, you're basically spotting a metaphor and a alliteration example of assonance or whatever the thing is. So it's really reductive and it's really harmful, I think, and it's not a progressive idea at all. I think what schools should be doing is inspiring young people to go out there and learn for themselves and equipping them with the abilities to do that. And what it shouldn't be doing is straitjacketing them into one particular way of seeing the world or viewing things, and lots of our education here is, it's a fairly arbitrary thing. You learn quadratic equations at school. You never use them again unless you're going to specialize in maths as a subject as an adult. So why is there so much emphasis put on these aspects of education that for most people are not relevant or less relevant? So I'm very critical of formal education. I think it needs completely unshackling from the national curriculum. I think it's a massive, massive problem.
Great, great. You're right. And I feel that, still I would say that, the education system in Britain must be a lot better than we are having here, because here we have the crisis even the worse. Today, it's not the program to go and discuss, but the situation is more and less the same, even the worse. But one thing, Mike, I would like to know from you, as a youth development trainer, leader, one thing is to be observed that every youngster is with different kind of potential. We can say that everyone has something in him or in her, but we do not really motivate our youth to know themselves. What do you would like to talk about? Is it not important to know yourself? Because once you know your strength, your weaknesses, you may can deliver, better than you are being taught.
I think it's so important, that actually young people are given time, really, just time to play and time to be curious and so much of their lives now are scheduled and dictated by routines, which stop them thinking and stop them being creative and stop them being able to explore the world. Why is it so important? To be so kind of regimented. You know, young people should have the freedom to make mistakes, to mess about, to do whatever, really. And I think that's what's missing, really. When I was at school many years ago, we had a teacher who took us out on a Wednesday afternoon mushroom picking. Yeah. Now it was 2 or 3 hours, a couple of times in the autumn, and that completely revolutionized my life. I still go out, in the autumn and pick mushrooms, but it engaged me with nature and gave me a curiosity for nature that I didn't have before. And it's that very simple thing. And if he hadn't have done that, I doubt I would have been the person that I am now. Now, schools don't have that freedom now. There'd be that many forms to fill out and risk assessment and health and safety and blah, 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 that for most teachers, they feel so straitjacketed and so restricted, they wouldn't be able to take their young people into a forest and pick mushrooms. It would be an impossibility. And that's a huge, huge loss, I think.
True, true, very true. And don't you see, Mike, that as you said, that a lot of time is wasted in passing the exams, completion of the syllabus, writing the books, writing the copies, rather than developing the skills among the youngsters, which are more important. That if the skills are developed, they can even deliver better. They can be better in their coming lives.
Yeah, I mean, exams have a very specific purpose, and it's to show how good a school is really, and use that in political ways really. From a pupil point of view, an exam is pretty useless. You cram information into your head for an exam, and you walk out of the exam and you've forgotten 90% of it. So it's not a good and all efficient way of learning something. It's quite the opposite. So from a pupil perspective, exams are detrimental. So what are they there for? Well, they're there for the schools, aren't they? They're there for schools, they're there for councils, they're there for governments. And it's the wrong way around. Basically, they're not serving kids at all.
Right, Mike. Mike, see that the base for everything is thinking. So, do you think that it is important to teach our youngsters how to think, and that is then their own matter what to think, because every thinker has its own approach. Every thinker can think the way he likes, but at least our institutions can teach them how to think.
Yeah, I just think, what do young people need? Well, they need the skills to read and write and so on. They need practical skills to survive in the world, and beyond that, though, what they need is access to materials and access to good, well-sourced information. It's no good in just letting them Google things, because, of course, 90% of what's on the internet is unverified, isn't it? It may be true, it may not be true. Um, I just think we're all different and we all need our own paths, and there's no point in pushing a square peg into a round hole. And the school system as we have it now is probably fit for maybe 20% or less, and the rest are square pegs in round holes. That's not how people learn. I don't learn in a classroom. That's not my particular way of doing it. I'm better left to my own devices, to be put in a library and just left surrounded by books. That's how I learn. But we're all different, aren't we? And I don't think one education system or one particular system is going to suit everybody. And that's the problem we have now, I think.
Very true. Viewers, with us today is Michael Stewart, a well-known novelist, and right now he is heading creative writing department in the University of Huddersfield at Bradford. And Michael's one new novel is about to come. We just spoke to him earlier on. If you have any questions from Mike, please do write down in the comment box so we can just share the questions with him and you can have the answer. And those are viewers who will be watching the recorded version of this video. You may also, if after watching you have some question, you may leave in the comment box so we can contact Mike for the answers. Right, Mike. One more question coming here that is just taken as very important nowadays in a skill called critical thinking. There was a time when critical thinking was taken as disobedience. It was taken as that a person is going out of limitations. But now critical thinking is quite appreciated. Even it is being discussed, and especially when it comes to the writing. I would like to listen your point of view about the critical thinking.
Yeah, again, I think it's so important. Really, it's so important that we recognise that, in within our schools as well. I think certainly so much of education now is about storing information, isn't it? It's about facts, it's about statistics, it's about figures. Uh, what's more important really is the ability to analyze those things and come up with your own conclusions from that. Because access to information is out there. There's no point in storing things that are readily available in a book or on the internet or anywhere else. But yeah, the ability to have independent analysis of these things is so important. Um, and we just don't focus on that enough, I don't think. I think it's absolutely woeful and neglected, really. And it's not in society's interest to have lots of free thinkers and people questioning and critiquing their system of governance. You know what I mean? It's probably not actually in the interests of a power out there. I mean, one of my favorite bits of graffiti on a wall some years ago, somebody had put question everything. Yeah. And then somebody had written underneath, why? And I thought that was a nice comment, really. There's maybe some limitations to it. Yeah.
Very true, very true. Right, Mike, how do you see right now you are, working in the university environment, you are working with the young creative writers. So how do you have your own experiences, your own analysis, your own observations about the future writers?
Well, I'm very lucky. I mean, I love my job. I've got some really, really talented writers at the moment. I'm really excited about where they'll go. It's always really good when you spot, talent, and you've got a student who is really good, and just seeing them succeed is so satisfying. I've got a student at the moment who's just graduated. I can't reach it from here, unfortunately, but there's a book on my shelf there called The Family Tree. I can see it just up there. And it's just been published by HarperCollins, and it's my student called Sarah Hussein. So Sarah Hussein came to the University of Huddersfield, did her undergraduate English. She did an MA in creative writing. She did a PhD in creative writing, and I was a supervisor. And she's just gone from strength to strength. Really, it's a wonderful book. It's a beautiful book. It's just been published in a large format. It's a big, tome of a novel. And it's terrific, and I'm just really excited about that. The Family Tree. So it's published by HarperCollins. Look out for it. It's a wonderful book.
Great, great. It's really not very much, satisfying, and you one feel a great honor one when your student is, growing like this. It's a great kind of, feeling as you are feeling quite happy that, one of your student, she was under your supervision, then she did masters, she did PhD, and now she wrote a book and she's, getting more and more popular. What kind of happiness, satisfaction do you get?
Well, I guess it's like being a proud parent, really. Yeah. When your kid does well, it's just you just feel immense satisfaction, really. I'm not taking credit for it. She's a very talented human being. All I've done really is be there as a supervisor, and my role's been quite a small one, really. But it's absolutely it's one of the nicest parts of the job, really. It's almost, in fact, it's almost as good as being published yourself, because in some ways it's better actually, because you don't have the anxieties. When you first get published, it's wonderful, and then you think, oh my god, what's going to happen now, and so you don't have those anxieties about your students. You just they're just out there in the world now, and they're getting on with it, and it's great.
That's great. That's really wonderful. Mike, how about your experience? Because right now you are in a city where I guess there are a lot of Asians, and in the past it used to happen that there was the language barriers, especially for the students at the primary level. So now you are having the students from different backgrounds, the Asian British, the African British, as well as the British. So you are having different kind of varieties, different kind of flavors. So how do you feel like, all are growing together?
Yeah, I just think we're very lucky really to live in such a multicultural society. I mean, I live in Bradford, which is close to Huddersfield. Bradford's a very diverse town, very, very high Asian population, very high Muslim population, and it works. Most people get on. There's very little tension. I mean, I wouldn't say there isn't any, because there is some. But generally it works, and generally we all benefit from each other's cultures and sharing each other's traditions and cultures, and it enriches life. I love trying new things. I love new foods. I love Indian food. I love food from all over the world. I love different cultures, the music, the literature, the art. So I've really benefited personally from being exposed to a wide range from across the world of different cultures. I've had a huge benefit from that. Um, I think we can all teach each other things. I think we can all benefit from that diversity. And again, at Huddersfield, we're very lucky. We have lots of students from different backgrounds. We have lots of Asians there, lots of Muslims, and it's great because we have, a prevailing narrative in the media, and it's a very limited one, isn't it? It's a very stereotypical one. Often when you see British Asian Muslims on TV, they're either terrorists, or they're arranged marriages or forced marriages, or they're being radicalized in some way, or they're being westernized in some way. So they're actually rejecting their culture. And what's really nice about my students is that they're challenging that. Sarish was saying in the book I was talking about, The Family Tree, it's challenging those prevailing narratives, and it's offering a counter narrative. And it's saying we can have books about young Asian Muslim women, and it's not about radicalization. It's not about terrorism, or it's not about westernization. It's not about any of those things. We're just going to have them, and they're going to be it's going to be a family story, and they just happen to be Muslim, and they just happen to be Asian, and that's not going to be the story. The story is going to be about them as individuals, and I think that's what's really interesting now in our culture, is we've reached that level now where we can now have these characters in stories and in our media, and they don't have to represent something. They don't have to represent their culture, their traditions, their religions, or any of that things. They can just be themselves, and that's the sign of a mature culture, I think.
Really amazing, really amazing. And especially as you said, when people get educated, so, those narratives get filled, which can be called the poor narratives or the narratives of negativity. And positive things get the place, they get replaced. As you talked about the Sarish Hussain, there must be many other who will be, in the coming time, bringing something more really close to the nature, really close to the realities, to have a counter narrative of whatever we call that, something can be destructive for any society. Mike, before we conclude, a couple of things are there. Number one, I want a message for the youth of the world, not only youth of the world, but for the writers of the world, and those youngsters who want to become the writer, those who are in the struggle to be the writer, and those who really want to be successful writers. What message would you like to please share with them all?
Well, don't give up, kick against the pricks, and don't let the bastards grind you down.
Great, great. So, the viewers, this is the message by Michael Stewart. You just heard that, never give up. This is something life actually, even we are going through this COVID 19. You saw that, the people who used to be working in the field day and night, now they are, converted to the online things, like we are sitting here in front of you all. So, things never stop. Just try to find the alternates, try to find the ways that if you cannot do one way, try the other way. If you can't become successful in this other way, try the third way, but never stop it. Micah, thank you very much. I would like to formally and informally invite you to visit Pakistan once this COVID-19 is over, so we can show you many things about the Pakistan, especially the natural beauty of Pakistan, and we can have also chance to visit different educational institutes like universities. We can meet some writers as well, and you will be our special guest, and we would love to host you, please.
Atiq, thank you very much. That's a very generous offer, and I will certainly take you up on that. I would absolutely love to come to Pakistan. It's a wonderful country. It's a beautiful place, and I would love to discover it for myself. So that's a very kind offer, and yeah, consider that an agreement. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mike. Stay with me. We will be continue a little chat again once we are offline. Dear viewers, again, kindly just watch this video again, as if you have any questions you may ask, and you can share our YouTube channel with all your friends, and you may share the comments later. Looking forward to see you again tomorrow. Thank you very much.